In this series, Process takes you behind the scenes and into the creative mind of artist and musician Stanley Lake, co-founder in 1988 of Quebec's Tour des Arts. This video will demonstrate the trimming process of the form that was created in video A of this series. And now, heads up with Stanley Lake.
Okay, here we have the form that I made yesterday, and you can see I can handle it. It's still a little soft in this area, which I want because I'm going to be going inside the form and pushing out where I make the cheeks and the jowls. I'll do that later. But this has to be firm enough so it can support the form as I turn it upside down. So what was the top of the vase yesterday will now become the foot of the head. And the way I attach it to the wheel head, as I trim, I add a little water to the lip of the top, which is now the bottom. Turn it upside down, and I put my wheel on, and I tap it into place. So the wheel goes around. You see it's not centered, but I'll just tap it in place and it will find its center. And the wetness of the lip that's on the wheel head, it'll somehow be secured into place with that wetness. So now I tap the bottom to get an idea of how thick this might be. All this extra clay has to come off. I remember that I made the inside narrower than I normally would on a vase, so I have to keep that in mind as I trim. So I'll start. We let the tool trim. The tool cuts away the clay. And all of this clay that I'm cutting off, I'll recycle, dampen it up a bit, put it in a plastic bag, and run it through my pug mill. So my loss throughout the year is minimal. When I was working very full-time, I would go through 2 tons of clay a year. Now I go through about 1 ton. Semi-retired, one would say. So here I have my left hand holding the form in place. For those other potters just beginning, you'll notice I don't have any lugs at the bottom holding in place, just that wetness. When I dampen the lid or the lip, keeps it in place. So here I'm often pressing this. That gives me an indication of how thin or thick that area is. So this clay is probably a little more moist than I would normally trim, but I want the head to be somewhat moist because I'm going to manipulate and push things out from the inside. So here I'm trying to follow the contours of the inside of the pot. When I was teaching, I used to tell my students that there has to be a relationship between the inside and the outside of the form so that the form isn't too heavy to the human touch, such as usually beginner coffee cups are quite heavy. They have a tendency to pull your hand down there, so bottom heavy. And I used to say the analogy would be you go up to someone and they look really great and you say, "How you doing today?" Because you just look great. And they say, "Well, I feel awful. You know, my stomach or my heart, whatever." So the inside, or let's say the outside of who you are or the form really needs to reflect what the inside is, and that will indicate really the overall state of the individual or the pottery form. So see, I get a little movement here as I press my finger down gently. So that's as far as I'm going to go here. I want the shape of a head to go on. So I want this contour here. I know I have a little extra clay here. I'm I'm not going to get that very thin because that's going to support some add-ons later. We want to get a nice flow here. Use one more tool just to clean up the surface, but generally I would clean this up a lot more, but I don't have to, because as you'll see later I'm going to be adding a white slip which is going to cover up any lines that might be here. But if I were doing this as a finished form, I would also take that rib again and just smooth things out. Now this clay, I forgot to mention in the other making video part of it, there has a lot of grog in this. Grog is clay that's been fired and then ground up into small particulate matter, and it's added to the clay body. It's an aggregate that opens the body up, reduces shrinkage, but it's pretty rough on your hands. But after you've done it, this is a high volume grog in this body, so I can do both throwing and sculptural forms with it. And after a while your hands get used to it. So that's basically the form, and we'll go on now to see how I make a mask, make a head. And taking it off, I just hit the side and that releases it from the wheel head.
So we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Process. And please feel free to hit the like button. In the next video in the Heads Up series, we will demonstrate how the trimmed form is transformed into a pond spitter. And please check out the links below for other videos created by the team at Cooking Mind Productions Quebec. And as always, thank you.